Final walkthrough, guys. We're going to do a GitLab CI/CD integration with our active testing. So we're going to introduce an extra stage, an extra phase into the GitLab pipeline of an existing pipeline. And we're going to make sure that tests are being triggered by the GitLab pipeline. And the results, of course, are communicated to active testing. That's what we need to do. Two steps, right? Two steps. We're first going to set up the configuration, and then we're going to go inside GitLab and set up our integration. Two steps. If you have access to GitLab, you're more than welcome to follow through with me through the exercises. If you don't have access to GitLab, this is going to be a demo for you. Okay, this is going to be a demo for you. Just sit back and enjoy the show. Right, so let's begin. Let me kill the slides yet again. We don't need the slides anymore. Let's go back to active testing. Let's begin with active testing. Okay. In order to set up that configuration for your CI/CD integration, you have to go under Settings, CI/CD. You have documentation. Unfortunately, the documentation is not always up to date, especially this portion. Some of it is better than others, right? In our case, it's not up to date. We're going to be using GitLab, right? But the instructions are primarily, if I go to GitLab, right, this is going to take me to the docs.nonamesecurity.com, right, which is our documentation portal. I'm going to log in with my account, and it's going to take me under the corresponding configuration. This is not up to date. This is for active testing version 1. But for the most part, the steps we need to perform are the same. Right? What differs, and I'll show it to you at some point in the future too, what differs is this. How you're going to run Docker and how you're going to pass the parameters to active testing, to the active testing CLI, right? To the active testing CLI. That's what differs for the most part. Everything else is the same, and you will see the instructions repeat themselves. Okay? Keep that in mind, right? The documentation is not always up to date. For some of them are, for some others are not. Okay. All right, I don't need this anymore. I don't need the JSON web token, so let me clean house a little bit. Okay, so what do we need? We need to run this generate CI/CD configuration wizard. And if you select it, you're going to get yet another wizard that has these 3 steps, identical steps as we've done before. So there's a fair amount of repetition here, right? There's a fair amount of repetition. You would expect that all of these can be done once and reused. Unfortunately, it's not the case yet. Right? It's not the case yet. So you're going to have to repeat a good chunk of the work you already completed. So you need to specify base URL. Now, generally speaking, this should be localhost. In our case, we're going to forgo all the extra steps to upload our code base or our code into the GitLab pipeline in order to build our packages and test it at that level. Right? Instead, we are going to test whatever we have in our VM, currently in our VM, and that's going to save us some time. And also, it's preferable because it isolates all the extra steps you're going to perform that are related specifically to the pipeline to just the steps for the CI/CD integration with active testing. So that's the isolation we like, especially in a training environment. Okay. So let me go back to Postman and grab that base URL one more time. Here it is. So let's copy this, copy, and let's go back to active testing and paste. So that's our base URL. The options, pretty much all the same, right? All the same. The only thing that's missing is the active workers, right? Remember the active workers? I'll explain it in a second, but you don't need an active worker right now because it's the active CLI's job to perform all the scans. So there is an active worker, let me put it this way, in the active CLI, right? Active CLI subsumes an active worker. Okay, that's first step number 1. The rest, we keep them as is. Let's select next. This is where we specify our sources. And remember, we have 2 sources, right? So let's go to the source. We have the users API. Of course, it's Swagger. We don't have a URL. We have a relative path, right? Why? Because I would like to use a relative path with respect to my GitLab pipeline, right? Where in my repository is my OpenAPI specification? Yeah, you can use a URL, but a relative path is preferable because it's part of your repository. And we're going to go ahead and type slash open API specification. That's the root folder in our repo that's going to contain the open API specifications. And of course, users-open API specification.yaml. That's the name of the file, right? That's the name of our file under our, let me go back under my temporary, do another tree. Here it is. It's the name of the file, users-oas.yaml. I'm specifying the same exact name because I'm going to be reusing the same file. So that's one. We're going to add another source because we do have the flights. So here's the flights API. It's also an open API specification. And again, I'm going to use a relative path. And again, I'm following the same nomenclature like before. Flights, open API specification.yaml, right? Flights, open API specification.yaml. Okay. Because I don't want to rename files. That's the reason why I'm following the same nomenclature, the same names. And that's it, right? We have the users, we have the flights. We can click next. And now we define our authentication. And again, you need to define. You have a secret manager that it's oblivious in what we have defined already. So if I select Open Secret Manager, it's empty. Unfortunately, I wish it was available even for the cicd, but unfortunately it's not. So we need to fill it up yet again, right? This is a big gap, and hopefully it's going to get fixed rather sooner rather than later, right? So because it annoys me. I can imagine if you have to work day in and day out. Well, I still have to work day in and day out with active testing, but still, it's annoying. So let's add a secret. Right, we're going to follow the same exact convention. John Doe basic, secret type basic, repetition. John is the username, Doe is the password. Right? So that's number one. That's the first one. Let's add the Postman collection. Here's John Doe token. John Doe token. It's a Postman collection. We can choose the same exact file we choose earlier on. And again, we're going to choose to upload a file right now. Files. Oops, it's under temporary. John Doe Postman collection.json. Navigate to the appropriate location. Grab the file. Select the file, and here you go. Here's your collection file. No environment, the body, same thing. $Doe token. I'm not going to add another secret. Like, I'm not going to add Jane Doe. These two more than enough for our purpose. And let's click save. And here you go. Right? I'm going to open it again just to make sure, even though it tells me right here, right? So I don't have to open it. John Doe basic, John Doe token. Good. So now we define the authentication yet again. Right? So John Doe basic. Oops. Basic. Role, same thing like before. Reader writer. Let's go to the type. Header. Authorization at John Doe basic. So that's your John Doe. Let's add another authentication to cover the token. John Doe token. Read writer. Header. Authorization one more time. The authentications are very repetitive. Very repetitive. And we select the token. Oops, I forgot to put the bearer. Can I edit this? Apparently I cannot edit this. Weird. Alright, so I'm going to delete it and I'm going to type it again. Header. Authorization. Bearer. Don't forget the bearer. At John Doe token. Now I can edit. If you don't have a string, you cannot edit, unfortunately. This is it. Right? This is it. Okay, cool. So we have both of our tokens. We're going to generate now the configuration. And this is going to give you a pop-up and a choice to download the file. Please download the file. Do not click done because you're going to have to go through the steps yet again. These wizards are transient. This configuration you see right here is transient. Right, so let's select download file. This is going to get us an active config.json. Right, and now you can click done now that we downloaded the file, and you're taken back to that cicd settings page. Right, the information you just configured, they're stored nowhere. Nowhere. I'm going to go to the downloads page for a second. And I can do a VI active config JSON. Let's do that so we can get some color coding going. All right, so these are all the information that this file contains. It's not too big. It's about 63 lines for our two sources and our two authentications, one of which is very long because this contains pretty much the escaped JSON Postman collection, right? But the rest is pretty straightforward. We do have clients who choose to do this manually, right? Because they want to automate everything from the pipeline. They don't want to be bothered with the user interface. Okay, it's in the works, so I'm planning to do a very similar type of an exercise for the next course for active testing. When I have time, I'll finish it. All right, but it's in the works. Okay, so that's the file. This is the only thing you need. So the next thing we're going to do, let me resize this. So the next thing we're going to do is pretty much do the GitLab integration, right? But that is going to be a separate section altogether, and that's going to be the final section of the second exercise. For the time being, the generation of this active config.json is done. That's the only thing you need to do before you go into your CI/CD tool. Right? All the tools are going to be using the similar type of a setup. Okay, so section end, if I can track it down, section end, your visual indicator. See you in the next one.